we did not create this sweet rock sound.
Yeah, getting jazzed up on a Friday afternoon though.
They have default ones. You can also add your own. So like if you had like your own intro theme, you still have to do it.
That is, yeah, I was gonna say that's next.
You should just do what's like the. Have you ever listened to those like scream therapy videos? Where you just like record yourself screaming like intermittent, like every like 3 seconds, just like wail into a mic. I think that'd be awesome. I'd listen to it.
Is that like the reverse of like ASMR?
Probably, yeah. I think it's. I assume it's meant to be like right once, like you don't actually hear it back. But I just think it'd be hilarious if it was like silent, and then all of a sudden it's just like, ah! Welcome to Atomics on a Friday.
Yeah.
We're live.
Live and on location.
El Caminos were exclusively Chevy, or was that like a? I never understood if it was like a model or was it like a style.
Is it a truck? Is it a car? Like,
is it somewhere in between?
Small truck. It's kind of being brought back with the recent. I think it's like the Hyundai Santa Cruz. It's a little El Camino 4-door, but they probably don't call it that.
Yeah, what is up with Hyundai being like super like ahead of the curve? They had like what was the Veloster? Was like the 3-door thing?
Oh yeah, the weird like door hatchback thing. Yeah. Yeah, El Camino, modeled from 59 to 60, and then 64 to 87, specifically Chevy GM.
Okay.
All right, I think we can kill the rock music now.
That was, yep.
Are you waiting?
Well, no. I mean, people are just pouring in right now, so I just want to make sure everybody has time to, get settled. And
that like remember the Chevy SSR? That was apparently the successor. I think we're on the same wiki page. That it reminds me like a PT Cruiser, like a Herman Monster mobile. That's what they turned that into. What a waste. They should do like a limited edition release and bring them back because those were pretty sweet.
Yeah, I'm on Auto Trader right now, and you can get a nice one for like $30K. I'm like, why buy new when you can buy like a restored El Camino SS?
Is it like good, like runnable, or is it more just like the frame and whatnot?
Oh no, it's like full blown. Like slap the plates on and drive off.
Oh my gosh.
Yo, they had a special edition for South Africa.
Like, that's a package of questions. Is it like color scheme or like off-roading edition?
Yes.
That'd be kind of sick.
So apparently a range of these like Chevy models that were based in like Hong Kong, South Africa markets, and they're like, looks like they're like shortened bodies compared to like the traditional like just long truck style.
That's something I always forget every time I go to Europe is like how the concept of pickup trucks just isn't like it's not a thing. It's just not as wide as a thing. I think I saw like 5 in my life outside of like the United States. I was like, oh yeah, like why would you actually need this giant thing? Like it's cool, it's fun, but like, maybe that's the El Camino's like niche is like sneaking in is like actually they're so wide. I don't know if they'd fit on most. Especially like older European city roads.
You probably had a jam in here, gents.
Let's do it.
But yeah, I was gonna say who pushes the music button these days?
I think we take turns.
Welcome to Atomics on a Friday. Today is Friday, and we have a full lineup of fun things going down today. Let's bring up camera hots. Yeah, I'm all really getting used to these buttons. So our agenda today, I think all the cool stuff's going down. We're going to jump into micro emulation plans, do a cool demo, and discuss micro emulations and ship some stuff downrange. I think that's why we're all here, is to run things live and see what breaks. Yeah, go ahead, Paul. I'll let you run the intros.
Right. So yeah, for those who are first-time lurkers or long-time lurkers, real quick, I'm Paul Michaud. I am a principal in
Did you have the
Zapanda.
beard, Jamie?
I did. I had a little bit of FOMO, and I was like, once I got the backstory, I was like, oh yeah, this is safe. Like I can beard myself. It's awesome.
That's great.
Because Mike messaged me. He's like, "Hey, did you add the beard for Jamie?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "Did you?" And then we pull up the slides, and we're like, "Oh, Jamie added that, so that's awesome."
I'm not gonna admit how long I spent on like Google Images. Like I'm gonna find the beard, not a beard, but like I think it's the same one. It kind of looks the same.
It is.
Well, your mustache is better. I feel like mine's a little bit too like thick, but we'll let it.
Oh no, it's perfect. Right. It's got the nice dual curve to it.
Oh no, I spent a lot of time like sizing this out. I'm like, it's gonna like it's. I had a long Thursday night. Let's just say that.
Right.
That's awesome.
You want to kick it over?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. So yeah, Michael Haig, threat researcher at Splunk, co-founder of Atomic Red Team, trying to get that in more frequent on this so that you don't have to do it, Paul.
Mike always forgets.
Yeah. And yeah, leave it there. How about you, Jamie? Thank you for joining us, by the way.
Thanks for having me. Jamie Williams. I lead MITRE Attack for Enterprise, so writing a bunch of techniques. I'm not doing that. A big fan of adversary emulation, purple teams. I've been doing, previously I was on eval, so doing a lot of development of actually part of the plan we're looking at today with APT29, but also doing emulation development with the micro stuff. So happy to answer any questions, kind of explain our philosophy. Apparently graphic design is not my passion, as you can see. I think I lost my, actually, I didn't miss too bad because you kind of lost your nostrils. So yeah, I guess I'm okay plus at Photoshop.
Yeah, I mean, once the mustache gets going, like you just generally lose the nostrils anyway. So it's
guardrails be damned. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's classic. I'm waiting for the comments to come in about the beard, but maybe that'll be at the end.
Everybody's just upset about the music, which rightfully so. So normally we do atomic base testing, so that's what we're kind of really focused on. But last year, towards the end, October, if I remember correctly, you all released micro emulation plans, which is kind of like a bridge in between atomic testing and a full-blown like adversary emulation simulation / red team operation. So Jamie, like as being part of the team that built this, like give us a high level, just kind of explain like the thought process and what's the gap, what's the bridge that makes this.
So we tried to capture it in this amazing table, as you can kind of see, but just to kind of give you, I guess, straight from the horse's mouth. So we are obviously huge fans of Atomic. I think even like back in 2017, early 2018, we were like, hey, this is awesome. We got into it. But especially for the use cases we were using at the time and kind of even now, adversary emulation, we were doing a lot of like the product evaluations where, Atomic's great, helps us really tune things out. But for that use case, we kind of needed that full story. Like, even if it wasn't as, I think a lot of people have, rightfully so, a lot of criticisms on, attack evaluations. We definitely are in the same boat. Like, it's not perfect. And we would love to kind of balance a lot of different things. But at least for now, we've always historically done those like big scenarios where let's look at like an APT3 or look at an APT29 or a Turla or whatever it be, and kind of say, starting initial access all the way to actions on objective. Sorry, I'm like mixing models here, going from going out of attack, but that full kind of almost kill chain. So we built a lot of plans in that structure, and I'm sure you've seen them in like the CTID library. But one of the things we recognized is like, having one of the best things about Atomic is like how easy it is to just pick up and run. Like, hey, like I'm interested in this technique. It's copy and paste, good to go. But also like the skill set where we would do like other assessments and we'd be able to say like, hey, like, we're very expensive red team. We're not always going to be here, but your folks, like your blue team, your system engineers, whoever's like intern project, whoever it is, like Atomic red team is very accessible. Like, it's like, all you got to do is be able to like, pick on a menu and kind of copy and paste. So, and even like our big scenario plans, like we recognize like it was a nightmare. Like, even internally, like, having other MITRE people use it or like people from our own team, it was like hours of setup, their infrastructure requirements. And I'm sure like Sounds like, Paul, you converted day 1 of 29. Like, I know it was a headache. Like, and we were very cognizant of that. Like, we built these plans to be more than right once, but also to the point where I think one of the biggest breaking points, at least on my side, was we released like, the APT29 plan. It was really cool. And then like SolarWinds happened and people asked like, hey, like, could you guys do like an emulation plan of that? And I started like scoping that and like, what would it actually take? And obviously it was like, months of development, all this research, all this, testing. And then like we took a step back and we're like, really, all I really wanted to emulate was like the golden SAML. Like the rest, a lot of that was like, stuff we've maybe even seen other places, or it was like, hey, like that's awesome. But like when people were asking for that like SolarWinds emulation, like it was like golden SAML and a couple other things. So that kind of just like sat in our mind for a while. And we thought like, okay, there's, Atomic's great, it's accessible, full, we know its cost in terms of entry and infrastructure complexity, it takes us no longer or no shorter than like 2 months to put one of these together. There's got to be something in the middle though. So that's kind of what we were aiming for with those micro, where, hey, like, we're still kind of looking at one behavior, like in an atomic style approach. Like it's an initial access where, a user's like clicking on something they shouldn't, or like a web shell where like, a file is being dropped in a certain directory, it was being connected to, and then there's like commands running from it. So it's still that like very like looking at something very particular, a very like, prioritized defender problem. But let's kind of take, let's understand 2 other ends of the spectrum and kind of tease out the best like aspects of like Atomic, like easy, focused, prioritized. Like you're not going to cover all of attack, but let's find the points you actually care about and zoom in on that. But then like, steal a little bit from full emulation where, as you kind of couple a couple techniques together, they kind of take a different form where like, a good example is like, you can kind of just execute individual techniques, but like, and you smash them together, they kind of have like their own little nuance. And the other thing we recognized was like, as a defender, like you don't, I'm interested in your take on this. Like you don't really defend atomically. You kind of like a web shell is a good example. Like you look at a common scenarios like that, it maps out to like 5 or 10 techniques. And like, you're not going to like worry about covering every single thing. You're going to be like, hey, like, am I better at defending the network traffic of a web shell versus the file creation versus the processes being spawned, or some there combination of. So what we're really aiming for was like, we did, I think like 7 or so micro plans, and some of them were like, like I said, web shell, AD enumeration. Some of them were like data source focused. Like, hey, like, can you see an adversary creating a registry key, populating it, modifying it, and deleting it? But really, we built out those plans. They're pretty cool, but like we were more invested in like, this is like a blueprint for something that we can do going forward. We're like, if another SolarWinds came around and we're like, oh, that's really interesting and something we need to emulate, we're able to kind of zoom in and say like, well, here are these knuckles that really stand out to us as things that like kind of compound behaviors that we want to emulate. And some of that might be, taking Atomic Red Team test and kind of string them together in a certain way. Some of that might be looking at full emulation plans and kind of basically abstracting out like, really, we're just interested in like step 4 of 10. But, just really just kind of investing in, I guess that like philosophy, but also like that kind of like quick, we built these in like 2-week sprints. So like quick development, rapid fire, but also like giving a defender like a zoomed in on view on something that really stands out to them. I promise I've never rehearsed that. That was not a huge sales pitch. So I recognize it was a huge brain vomit, but hopefully that tracks and was somewhat helpful.
Totally awesome. Definitely a lot of great information. I just wanted to bring it up on the site, on the repo here. I think we have a couple questions, but the one thing when you mentioned web shells, I went to the web shell emulation plan here, and the first thing that like really caught my eye, and I think this goes for, a lot of questions we see on Twitter is like, but how do you detect it, right? And I love that each one that is in the repo here has like this set of criteria, of going for detection. And then something we always forget about here on Atomics on a Friday is our mitigations. but I love that this is here for folks to go off and like key on. And one in particular I was looking at too was the AD enum one, which was really cool. There was some good stuff down in here for that too.
Appreciate it. Yeah, and other realization there was like, we wanted these to be like in the spirit of Atomic, like easy, like super approachable. But also to the point, like we talked to a lot of folks and we're like, honestly, like people will look at emulation plans and then never execute them. So we're like, okay, how do we like bring value to that community where it's like, you're kind of just looking at stuff and like even like mentally tabletopping it. So our approach here was like, exactly as you kind of noticed, like, let's write these out like attack techniques where it's like, we'll give you the adversary perspective, everything you need to know, even to the point of like, if you scroll up a little bit, like we recorded a live demo. So if you do see any, like I tested most of these on like my personal computer. So if you do see like weird, like there's some like weird, like, you know, redacted areas, but if you see anything weird, let me know, because I probably need to get that down. But yeah, hey, like you can read about what's happening, see like what execution should look like, or if you don't really care, like that's what it kind of looks like, and then translate that to like, what are you going to do about it? So yeah, I think that was another big realization to us, is like, you know, not everyone has the time, the resources, the cycle, the interest to really put hands on keyboard, but there's still, you know, I think, you know, Atomic Red Team was definitely a breaking point, hopefully for industry in this respect, that like adversary emulation is like very much like crucial. It's just, you know, what that actually looks like in your organization is kind of like dependent on, you know, kind of, I guess, where you are and what you have access to.
Yep. Have you seen folks like fork the repo and they're kind of like adding, extending things, or is it half and half?
Not yet. We're doing some internal development, like that's probably going to end up in the repo, as well as like other projects that are like adopting that kind of structure. But not yet. We're hoping that might take off, but honestly, like I said, even for us, it was more just like a proof of concept. Like, hey, like I said before, even getting back to like SolarWinds, it's something we talked about. Like, hey, what would it look like if we took these full emulation plans and kind of like watered them down a bit? So for us, it was a huge success in terms of, hey, going forward, this is something we can iteratively do. So keep an eye out. I think we'll be adding some in the near future. I don't want to spill too much of the excitement, but yeah, but even going forward, I think, you know, I think if not, I mean, obviously like attack evaluations is always going to, you know, at least for now, be those full emulation plans. But if people are interested in terms of, you know, both contributing micro plans or just, hey, defenders are looking at it, that's a really bad detection idea, or here's some thing you never heard of, here's really good mitigation, please don't do that. I think we're open and game for all that feedback. Because like I said, one of the best parts about like kind of baking it into like an attack technique structure is it becomes like a living document where, you know, if something changes, we're more than happy to kind of keep those as up to date as possible.
Yeah, and no, that's awesome, because I think it gives kind of both abilities to do this. You know, if you have the resources to go hands-on, kind of like what we're going to go through and show you like exactly like step by step, but you also in some of these have methods to do utilize invoke like wrappers or executors, but also Caldera. So there is the option to be able to support those and import them, so you know, don't have to spin up 7 boxes and a C2 and figure out all the gotchas like that we went through as we were trying to figure out this, and just kind of work our way through it of like, let's do it step by step and see what works and what breaks and go from there.
Exactly. You're reminding me I got to do my MITRE Caldera pitch. So yeah, exactly to your point. For all those micro plans, the objective was like get it to the point where it's a compiled binary, and it's literally just like double click. There's defaults, but we did supply like the source code. So if you want to recompile it, if you want to run it, like I think for all the demos, I ran them on command line. So like you can change the args if you want, but it is as simple as like there is a binary somewhere in there in a zip if you just like want to double click it. But yeah, I think that Caldera integration page is really slick as well, because that was one of the things as you experienced with like the day one of APT29 was like we would build these really rich, nuanced plans that were made for like, you know, manual execution, whether it's like Cobalt Strike, Interpreter, Puppy, POSH-T2, whatever. And like porting that, like Caldera is great, but like that translation is brutal, because it's like Caldera has its own runners, it has its own flags. And I imagine like as folks are using whatever they're using, whether it's like, you know, some Atomic Red Team feature or BAS or whatever they're doing, like we wanted to make those micro plans as like, this is just a payload. Like how, and I think that's really what there's like that huge README. Effectively what it says is just like, take the binary and have Caldera double click it and you're good. So like I said before, it was something that we knew was possible. It was just exciting to actually see like, and really just prove like, yeah, like we can totally do adversary emulation double click. Like it's not going to be like a clippy kind of thing. Maybe we do a GUI it someday that just like pops up and is like, you're about to get leet. But I don't know. Could be fun. But it was just really just like a warm and fuzzy for us. Like it is possible to give like almost anyone the ability to kind of do this kind of emulation testing.
And the one thing I did like is that even if you set up the environment which was just 2 systems for our instance for APT29, which was the C2 framework, and there was a redirector. And if you didn't want a redirector because you're hosting it within the same network, you could 86 that box. But for like me, I didn't want to rebuild using the precompiled because they had a specific IP address hard-coded, which is fine, right? And that's great if you have that. So to be able to follow the directions of like regenerate the payloads that you need to make sure that your local host set up for Meterpreter or whatever C2 framework you're using for some of the initial stuff, it was really simple. And I think there was like four different things that I had to just grab from known repos, like PS invoke imager, whatever one that one is, and UPX, etc. So props to that for being straightforward and easy to follow along with.
The setup for some of these, it was hit or miss. We had some fun adventures on our side as well, because like especially for day 2, there's some oddities where it's like, oh yeah, like generate a PowerShell encoded like payload and like tuck it into this file and then tuck it here, crop it here, cert util it over here. It was like yeah, good times. It was like as soon as you reached out about 29, I was like, this is gonna be such like a deja vu flashback. But this was really exciting for us too, because I remember like when Atomic Red Team kicked off, like the folks that taught me adversarial emulation were just wrapping up like the APT3 plan. So like this was kind of like our first step of like what's next. Because like if you go back and look at, I think it actually might still be hosted on the attack site. The APT3 plan was like very much it was effectively an Intel product where it had the emulation like overlay, but a lot of it was like, who is this actor kind of, this very rich, like intelligent, like leaning thing. And I think that's kind of over the years, we've been dabbling that with like, Atomic Red Team is like very offensive focused. And we were trying to balance that middle of like, not being too like CTI focused or like, you're here for the red team stuff. We don't want to like, if you don't care, like good for you, like just skip it. But also like making sure it's still threat informed. So I think if you kind of even generally poke around that repo, you'll kind of see us like, I guess, sway back and forth. So I don't think it's like in the repo proper, but there's like an archive folder for 29. We made this like, I actually love it. It's this like slick PDF of like, it's I think it's kind of cool. It's like basically attack mappings for a single step. I think it's like the cited intelligence and then like how to do emulation. We never did that again because again, you're really just adding cost to emulation plans. But we always do kind of cite, like, especially when we do like briefings on like what's adversarial emulation. Like there really is no right way to do this, but like here's a bunch of different options in terms of like, what do you actually need? If you just need hands-on keyboard, if you go to click emulation plan and then the PDF, I love, this is like one of my favorite things we ever did. I wish we had more time to do like more stuff like this, but yeah, a bunch of stuff. There's like we used to spend a lot of time doing these like op flows, and I was like, yeah, that's great, cool. But like it's so it's expensive. It takes a lot of time. Like a little background stuff. This, like, to me, like if I was king of adversarial emulation, I would build everything like this, because before micro, everything would look like this, because this just to me kind of like when I think adversarial emulation, I think exactly what this kind of shows. Like, what are you doing? Why did you do that? How do I do it?
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
Do you want to share that link?
Yeah. Let me drop that in there.
It's like the speakeasy of that repo, where there's like, everything's like there, and you're like, oh, the 29 plan. I'm like, are you looking at the 29 plan or like the 29?
Yeah, this is really cool. Yeah, I keep thinking about like a purple team exercise, and when I see this, is very much what I've seen recently on a purple team exercise, where it's very broken down and has the intelligence piece wrapped in there, and it's really neat.
And honestly, you can kind of almost see like the evolution to micro plans in this, because like you'd be like, oh, like step 2 could be a micro plan, or like that thing you probably did with day 1, where it's like the right to left override payload, double click it, and it spawns C2. Like it's more or less kind of a micro plan. It's just how how quickly and how violently can we get to that point without, hiring a staff of 10 and doing a bunch of code review and all that fun stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is cool.
I didn't even sleuth the repo enough, but now I need to go back and check this PDF out because this is awesome.
Yeah, what else is hiding in here?
I might be as surprised as you.
There.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
All right.
That is cool.
Let's keep going.
Good share.
So that's really like this setup of the micro emulation stuff. So high level of the micro emulation plans, where they came from. We shared out the blog post that kind of introduces micro emulation plans. Let's jump into the one that we're going to go through.
We even had an artist do that rendition of. I'm curious, what's your interpretation of the fence and the eyes? Now unbiased, we've never talked about this, so this is I guess we're doing it live. Does it make sense?
I don't know. I saw it again this morning, and when I looked at it a little closer on the slides as well, I was like, I didn't put together with the bat eyes or animal whatever eyes behind it, but I'm not sure.
I think we biased ourselves and spiraled into this makes absolute sense, and then we're we didn't do any product testing. So the idea was it's different views of a monster, and it's a full emulation plan is looking at the entire monster, and you have these really thick links in the chain or the fence or whatever, and you're taking really big views of a huge monster, and Atomic is you're taking really zoomed in views of different monsters, and then Micro's somewhere in the middle. It's again, graphic design is not my passion, but that was the idea. I still think we probably could have added a couple more days to think that one through a little more, but at least it was a good laugh.
The elaboration, now I see it. If you had me just go through it, I'd be
yeah, it definitely stands out now.
Yeah, you zoom in, you're yes, we're good.
We should have did an alt text with a huge manifesto, here's the explanation of what this is. Appreciate it, damn it.
Yeah,
just takes up the whole page.
My favorite part was the hacking and hacked, but yeah, I missed that, but I went right to this.
That's probably the best part. That's how every breach happens.
Yeah, exactly as one should.
Things just happen. Evil has dropped.
You should do a defacement, or is it what's the technique? Internal defacement and impact. Atomic red team test of just dropping that on someone's desktop background or something.
I think there is an atomic for replacing the desktop.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, people use that internally to prank other people or other teams. Yeah. So I feel sometimes atomics have been misused.
Well, there's our next micro emulation plan is stringing the print screen desktop and then chaining it with the internal defacement. That'd be pretty classic IT prank.
I forget what the next slide is. I don't remember.
It is on APT29.
Oh, yeah.
The emulation plan.
APT29. Of course, we have to throw in the mascot because no adversary is complete without a mascot, and 17 different names associated.
We're trying to fix that. I don't know if you're tracking attack campaigns, but yeah, we're breaking this. This fella is going to be hopefully a bunch of different pieces in the future. Question though, have either of you been to have you seen the physical statue?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
I wanted to climb it and
Action
get a
figures.
picture, but I figured they'd probably yell at me.
So I went to the very first FailCon out in California when they started this, and they had mascots and full blown armor suits of it walking around. You get pictures taken. I have a picture of it. It's in my desk somewhere.
That's awesome.
It is top tier. Say what you will, but it's fun at some certain points.
Oh, it works because you can't forget these names. It's the best mind slug ever. It's the name threats however you want, but the catch here, it's pure marketing, but it's gold.
It works. So there's two scenarios. We're focusing on scenario one. So kind of I know you focused a lot more on scenario two, but what's kind of the scenario one outline for APT29?
Yeah. So at the time we were trying to, because this is all preface everything with it was made for an attack evaluations use case, and we always did 2 days of testing, at least at the time. So day one was a little bit of their I think I forgot the software names, but Cosmic Duke, Sea Duke, Cozy Duke. It was kind of what we interpreted as like their mass infection campaigns, like, you know, spray and pray. Let's just like send out a bunch of phishing emails. So you clicks it. So like the general like progression was, you know, someone clicked on something they shouldn't. They dropped, you know, kind of more of their commodity malware. They did some light reconnaissance, some light collection, and then they figured out, oh crap, like I actually like this victim, and they dropped maybe like a stage 2, a little bit more advanced. I forgot the exact like what dukes line up to what, but and they move around a little bit, do some credit enumeration, do some lateral movement, and then, you know, a little bit of a second tier exfil. So it was kind of like that, you know, more opportunistic infection. And then the day 2 we modeled after like their power duke. It was actually almost exclusively, shout out to Velexity. They had like a really great report on like the power duke campaigns targeting the DNC. So they were like these really, really surgical spearfishes with like these, I think it was like election lures about like the shocking truth about the, you know, 2016 or election or whatever. And that was like actually where I learned about like LNK files and spawning PowerShell and all that good stuff. So that's where they immediately dropped like their Power Duke suite, which at the time was like, you know, I put your like, you know, 2016 hat on, like PowerShell was like all the hotness. It was like, wow, like, you know, before, you know, probably one of the catalysts for like script block logging. So it was like, oh, like this is like really like exotic stuff. So a little bit of that. And then we stole, and that was one of the interesting things about doing these full scenarios as well, was like, we kind of Frankensteined a lot of these scenarios where it was like, this is not actually what their campaigns look like. We just kind of were taking interesting nuggets and jamming it in. So like the day 2 stuff also included like their Posh Buy a little bit, like their WMI toolkits. And then we even did like, it was actually really cool. I'm surprised they let us do this. We were doing like exfiltration over like OneDrive. So like mapping a drive. I didn't know you could net used map to a OneDrive account and then just like, yeah, you can exfil stuff out. That was pretty fun. Obviously we were using like dummy data, but in general, that was just neat. So it was like, if you look at like the op flow, that was like the 2 general vibes was like, you know, spear and hopefully, and, you know, you think about evals, we were trying to like, you know, not necessarily make something that had like curb appeal in terms of, oh, that's interesting, but also like this, make it resonate with you. Like, hey, like you could easily be targeted depending on who you are by like, you know, this actor, you know, GRU might be interested in you, or FSB, sorry. You know, Russian government might have you as like an intel requirement. But also, like, you know, they do these mass infection things. I think they did that again with like during COVID, like send out a bunch of stuff and see who clicks it. So we're trying to get that like balance of like, you know, this actually might be on your like threat model. Like this is something you should worry about. So day 1, I know you definitely dealt with this. Day 1 was a little bit overfit to like Puppy. Like Puppy was the hotness at the time. Like we were like, oh, this is super stoked. And it kind of, we always had this like translation of like looking what we wanted to do and then translating that to like an appropriate tool. So like Puppy kind of fit. And there's some interpreter in there as well, just to have that diversity of like when that kind of switch from like stage 1 to stage 2, like just to, you know, diversify the, obviously we weren't evaluating like toolisms, but just to make sure there was like some diversity there. Another catalyst for MITRE Emulation Plans was day 2, because, you know, obviously we had at the time we had like a licensed tool. Everything was kind of built in a similar fashion for this one tool. And then like, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks before we were going live, we had like that license like ripped out. And we're like, oh crap, like we gotta like port all this stuff. So if you go to like through the day 2 stuff, it's very modular. It's like, okay, like you scroll down a bit, it's like, well, this is that horrible setup I was telling you about. Like you have to, it looks like a little bit, it's awful. Like you can see like you're encoding like a DLL and then like gutting it and putting it in a script. Like it's awful. But basically like the day 2 setup was like, load this PowerShell script, run it. It'll do everything for you. And like load this, load that. So like that was like another one of those like, oh crap, like we should do this more often. Cause like once you get through that, like that part, which is awful, like the actual execution is pretty much like not only modular, but like pretty much just like you can close your eyes and just get through it.
Yeah, these are really cool. I remember when some of the initial evals came out, and I think I hope everybody kind of sleuths through them and looks at all the cool content, because there is a lot of content outside of like the web page showing all the vendors and everything. And but it's neat because it's like when I look at it and kind of like from not from maybe from like the Defender side, just like, oh, like let's see like what new things can be added to Atomic, or what new behaviors may have been performed, you know, by the red team side, you know, what tools or what things have been kind of pushed out and what do they look like. And then the vendor side of it, when you click through all that, I always like to see, kind of like talking about the evals here, but I always like to see like how the product sees what these things look like too. Like, because like for instance, like some of them are obviously labeled like, what was it? There was an obvious one here, not make link, but anyway, I guess I lost it. Like step 5 or something, WMI or something like that. But when it's labeled like that, did I miss it or?
This is like, if you go to the archive, it's all in the same thing. But yeah, if you pop back out, it'll have like this is, there you go.
Yeah, we'll just click one. Yeah, like step 13, load step 13, or something, right? Like it's always just like cool because you can go back to the page where the vendor's product is and kind of see what piece and what it looked like to that product. As far as visibility goes and or prevention, if there was any kind of prevention. I don't know if at the beginning they were doing prevention or if it was.
This was the first round. Yeah. Okay. So and that was one of the, I mean, not to get on an evals rant, but that was one of the core philosophies is like exactly as you said, like we saw a bunch of really cool products, can't rank them. They're all pretty neat in their own respective way because every vendor sat down with like a different philosophy. So like exactly to your point, the best thing we could do was like 2-part, like purple team the vendor and show like, hey, like, you know, for every one of those, it's actually, I always used to always say like 80% of the value of evals was like the interaction with the vendor. Cause like we would sit down, we would kind of exactly as you said, like explain, we're about to run this script. Like, what do you think is going to happen? Like just kind of cheeky, like, and then they'd be able to see like, oh, cool. Like we detected it as we expected. Or even their analysts, like, hey, we wrote these alerts. I've never seen what that alert looked like when it's fired. That doesn't make any sense. Or like, that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. So that kind of like purple team experience, but then exactly to your point, you know, the eval results are like, I know there are a lot. It's really hard to like grep that, but like being able to exactly to your point, like go to a website, see, I understand what happened. Here's like, if I bought X product, this is what I could expect to see. And then going and look at the source code and saying like that translation of like, you know, 1 + 1 = like what? That we're still trying to figure out how to like make that more accessible. Cause I imagine from your perspective, it's like nothing. Here's like a million, like, you know, probably, you know, millions of pages and screenshots in terms of like all these vendors. And it's like, what do I do with this? So definitely a hard problem to have, but it's definitely, I mean, I'm personally really grateful to have experience like working on that project, but also that like, you know, these vendors are willing to kind of just like show us stuff. It's like, I personally, I've never worked on like Splunk or any blue team stuff. And like, just sitting down through like 4 years of that process, I'm like, oh, I kind of get like detection engineering and actually like can somewhat have like an intelligent conversation in that space.
I was just randomly thinking like it might be really cool because it really is like a large scale purple team exercise, but like it would be really cool if there was a way to like almost showcase that during the evals. Like probably 1 or 2 would be willing, but it'd be interesting to like showcase like, you know, you sitting with vendor and then like kind of going through the stages and the steps. Cause that really is, it really is like a large scale purple team exercise. And really
that was actually one of the goals of releasing it here is like, I'm sure everyone does it because it just like have so much free time, but releasing that and saying like, hey, like we evaluated like these products and we documented the configuration. Like here's everything that happened in our purple team. Like go do this in your organization. Like you have the exact same emulation plan. You might have the same tools. You might not have the same tools. You probably have a different configuration. You have other tools. Like compare your environment to what you see on the site. But again, that was one of those like, hey, and I apologize because setting up this emulation plan is going to like take like a week because it's super fun.
We had a question in chat of are EVTX logs going to be in future evals?
So I'm assuming there's like Windows event logs. Yeah. There's some vendors that, so all of the evaluations are always targeted at like a particular vendor. So some of the vendors like ingested that. So if you go through the results, you can kind of see like, hey, they were using like 4624s or whatever, or they were using their own like, you know, kernel callbacks or whatever. So it depends. We I say like a collective we, like I'm not really on the evals. I consult, but I'm not really on the project anymore. We didn't really prescribe, so it was up to them. Like, hey, if my EDR product uses it, it does. If they didn't, they didn't. So we didn't really want to. Like, I think a really cool evaluation, though, to your point, would be like a baseline of like, hey, there's no vendor here. We evaluated Sysmon and event logs and just saw what happened. The only problem though is like, at least now, if you look at those plans, there's like it's a whole week. So like it just the time and resources. There are already like 30 vendors. It's like making that 31 would just kind of be like a little bit of an ask.
We should have our open source vendor.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome. Just like just like a random power team of like awesome people just show up and like, okay, yeah.
I think there's a few people that would be open to building a lab or something similar to like what it would be like with specific logging of like Zeeks and Sysmons and log collection. Just doing that, and if it was like people want to do an open source, like I think there's a lot of interest that we'd be down for that style. And
to your point, Roberto Rodriguez, actually, this plan, they did a hackathon where he did exactly that. He took the day 1 plan, the day 2 plan, recorded like the execution with like some awesome like tunes, like DJ beats in the background. So you can kind of watch the YouTube video of like him working through Puppy and Meterpreter and Posh T2. But then exactly to your point, dumped all, I think it's like Windows events, I believe Sysmon with Sigma, and then like Zeek, if I recall correctly. But you basically like that repo has like, you know, effectively to your point, like an open source evaluation. And then we did like a 2-day event where people just kind of looked at certain steps, started to put in together. I think if you go through like the issues, they did like an issue for every step, and you could like start to craft detections. But in general, I think it was just really good to have like an outlet for this is what that data looks like, I guess, from like more native Windows telemetry.
Yeah, that data set, just kind of peeking it now, we put it in chat for everybody. A lot of stuff from Zeek, PCAPs, Sysmon event logs. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff, and being able to replay it. So.
And again, that was another fun one where like I was getting these like late night like Slack DMs from him, and he's like, puppy this, puppy that. And I'm like, I don't know, man. They're like not bashing them, like, but I'm like, it's just like it's hard. It's really hard. And I think that's where we were kind of like, we'll do this on our side, but like maybe Mike, there's these micro plans. They got something to them because, you know, unless you just have like, you know, a whole day or a week to kill, like it's a lot to ask.
Sure. I think that's kind of like one thing is, especially because they're not pumped out all frequently and constantly maintained, you kind of build it and then release it. There's things like tools that come out of date, like with Puppy, you know, being that it's like 2.7 for Python, there's a lot of dependency issues, couldn't get it working. I had like 6 VMs going of different setups and configurations to try and get it, just couldn't do it. So then I kind of tweaked it a little bit to make it work within Covenant, because there are some interactive aspects to it where things, the ones C2 frameworks that I work with, they mostly task versus an interactive. So made some interesting modifications to make it work, but the end result is still the same at the end of the day. Like,
and that like, and it's funny too, because like you mentioned that is like even looking at this page now, like even the emulation target changes. For like in this case, like APT29, like SolarWinds is like a huge aspect of that group, and like obviously with campaigns we'll be able to track that a little better. But I remember I was super annoyed because like we did all this emulation stuff, we did like all this work, and then I think it was like right before we released the results, I forgot the name. It was like something to do with like Ghost or something. They had just did like Esset or someone had released this like huge APT29 report, and we're like, are you kidding me? Like we just did all this work, all these results, all this emulation, and like now they're on to the next thing. And like, you know, the Dukes and everything that we emulated is like, you know, old stale toast. And we're like, oh crap, like that's so annoying.
But still valid. Like even, you know, and I know like with the idea that you're trying to emulate some core parts and not the whole thing, there's still some really valid opportunities to go test and provide it, because it's a variation of the technique that the outcome is slightly different. And so validation of that detection and prevention is still important. So even if it is out of date and they already pivoted, like there's still so much value you can get out of these. Like it was cool to step through, and I'm like, I totally forgot that thing was even a technique. And I was like, all right, let's go. Yeah. So
right to left override for the win. Just fun nugget. If you're interested, like look at the results for that. Like it's funny how many UIs broke with that weird like.
So it calls to go kill the after. So the first one is to execute your puppy instance, and then later, once you get your interpreter session going, like go back and kill the first one. Well, when you start to do like, go get the process name is like 30 different characters. You're like, and it's like, oh, sorry, that process doesn't exist. And I was like, no, this process definitely exists. Like those are the characters you told me. Like go kill it, and then it's like, all right, just use the ID because using the name is not going to work. Yes.
I apologize. I think that instruction for the IDs and the instructions. But I think to your point, I think that's something we knew. We were like, oh crap. But yeah, it was like that was like our kind of welcome to red operator, like little like, oh, like why can't you kill the process? Like, I thought you were elite. Like it's super easy. You see it, kill it. Yeah.
We call that red team struggles.
Yeah. Flailing.
Yeah.
I probably should explain that one for the super inside joke. So one of the interesting things APT29 did was there's this like weird Unicode character. It's like a right to left. It's actually not weird. It's for like languages that read right to left. But you can flip. I don't know if you have the payload like handy, but like you can flip the characters of like any string in Windows. So what they were doing was they would obfuscate file types and like inject that character to like make exe is bad because it's palindrome, but make like source files not look. Yeah, I think that's a good one. Like 3aka.doc.
Yeah,
like flipping those around. We're like, hey, like it's kind of similar to like the double file extension, things like that. Yeah, basically being able to obfuscate, especially for phishing payloads. But what we realized, like after from a red perspective, we're like, oh, that's pretty cool. We see it on our desktop when it wasn't on Linux. Like we see it on our desktop and it's all like different looking. But then like that character cascading into like EDR products and File Explorer, and you're like, oh, this is like a slippery slope. There's actually some of the results, if you go and look at like the vendor, like their entire, like from that point on, the entire page, like all the text is backwards, which we thought was the coolest thing we've ever seen at the time.
The trying to get that going was not when I was trying to like paste those characters, because if you go look at like the character structure and like watching it flip, it was really like it messed with my head, and I really had no idea what was going on, because all of a sudden it was just rearranged everything, and I was like, is this right? And I'm like looking to make sure like, okay, it's close enough in character structure. It's good.
We had a fun, I'll call it a meeting, like brainstorm. We just had like a whiteboard and we tried to like map out like any good looking file name that would like kind of benefit from that. I think we filled like at least half a whiteboard. It's super fun. I'm actually surprised we don't see that more often, because it's something like, again, it's like one of those like, I mean, I dare call it living off the land, because like, Windows isn't going to support, like language isn't going to not support like, diverse inclusive language. Yeah, this stuff's awesome. So it's like it's never going to go away, but yeah, I'm surprised we just honestly don't see that more often, especially with like how common like social engineering and the double click of the user is.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember when we wrote this blog back in the day, it was such a thing. And they had, I would assume it's still within the engine there at Red Canary. But yeah, that was pretty cool. It basically reverses it live kind of for the analyst, right? And yeah, it's kind of neat.
But to your point about like stuff aging off as well, like we've done, I think like 2 or 3 different emulation plans since this one, like the full kind of spectrum. But like to this day, like if people are working on like, 4104s or PowerShell telemetry or even like ETW, we still refer back like, hey, like you're not going to get a better like PowerShell focused emulation plan from us, at least, rather than like the APT29 stuff. If it like, Handwave that was developed like 2 or 3 years ago, I forgot now, but like if it works, it's actually, if you can get it running, it's actually pretty neat. But I think that was one of the other things we were trying to push towards micro plans, is like maintenance. Like I'm curious to see the live demo. Like I trust that you got it working, but like,
we tweaked some stuff.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I don't blame animation. Our animation that's not animated.
It's animated in the slide. Like I don't know what happens. this is going to be like how the demo works.
It's APT.
All right. Due to screen constraints and copy paste, so I don't miss anything, I'm not going to be able to see what's going on.
That's okay.
So just tell me if something's share screen.
If you see our faces drop, like, just know something horrible happened.
Yeah. All right. You can all see this, yeah?
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Defender for the win.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so that fixed the broken stuff. That's fine. All right, so this is kind of like a perfect example, right? If we look at the binary over here, this is what it looks like when the user just sees it. But you can see the file name changes in this instance. So that's kind of interesting off the bat. Like, I didn't even pay attention to this when I was testing it, but it's fine. Defender will work. So this is one of the things I had to tweak. It called for Puppy using RC4 encryption, but I could not get that to work. So I used Covenant, my all-time favorite. And as you can see, our sysmon endpoint checked in. We still use the port. Same thing. The host of 104 is still the same, similar to that. But again, due to Home Lab's structure, we flipped it to 172. So if we go back into the grunt, we interact.
I've never actually. It was kind of weird. I guess I'm a huge fan of Covenant. I've never actually like watched it. Just kind of analyzed like some of their features. Yeah, this is pretty cool.
I'm kind of upset it's no longer in development, but Mythic is a very close second to me, and I'm starting to take that over. So, I think so. With Covenant, we specify the PowerShell so that it's going to execute PowerShell. What this is going to do is basically go through the user's profile and look for specific files, and then grab those and then zip them up into a zip folder with an app data called draft. So if we just go rip this, let's see if
this was that works. Smasher grab, like, what are we looking at here? Yeah, we thought that was like a pretty, at the time we were like, this is like the most advanced script I've ever seen. Look at this one liner, like, I mean, the future is now.
Job done. It doesn't.
Yeah. Even has compression.
What? There's like not even a semicolon in this. This is awesome. Oh, there is. Okay. Oh.
I think it did. All right. So now the next step was to download. So we will go grab that from Erlich Bachman's profile. And it was draft. That's it. If I can spell again.
Death. That's it.
Let's see. Did I get it right? I think I did.
Best of luck. Yeah. See bytes.
Tasking.
It's happening.
Going.
Where's it? Is there like a file manager or where? Oh, yeah. That looks like it's not empty. That's awesome. How did you litter the victim? Did you like?
So I'll go back. So this is my lab. So there's already stuff just littered everywhere.
Okay.
I was doing some sharp testing the other day, some testing of PCAPs for SMB collection. So there's always things just littered about.
So I'm assuming like if you were for an opportunistic like victim, they probably would have proceeded because that's a huge. Oh wow, it's still going.
Oh yeah.
Oh, downloading. Okay, I didn't realize it was.
Yep.
Yeah, look at that.
I can't see. Where is it? Okay. So if we go to data, there's downloads, and then once it's complete, it would show up here. I won't make you all sit there and wait for it to download.
Can you run like async task? Like, can you keep?
Oh, just add stuff to it? Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it's similar, I guess, from my understanding that the tasking of like Cobalt Strike or other C2s that do tasking does that. So then the next stage after that gets downloaded was to deploy the stealth kit. So in our Galley box, oh man, I can't see it. We spun up the handler. I already generated the payload. So now we're going to go execute it. This is one that I had to tweak. So two things. One, because I couldn't get Puppy going. And two, it calls for using monkey.png, which... we were talking about this yesterday, Jamie. It was taking a interpreter PowerShell output and embedding it into a PNG, and that gets uploaded to somewhere.
So that monkey PNG was like one of the notorious things from this like intrusion. Like I said, we kind of finagle things and move things around a little bit, but like one of their big like handles at the time was like office monkeys, because they did this like huge phishing campaign with this like little gif of like monkeys in office, and like people were obviously like clicking on it, but then they were like forwarding it around. So I've just like heard these stories of like people doing IR, and it's like this damn like little gif thing that no one will stop. Like it just keeps showing up everywhere. So yeah, that was like I don't think it was like Stego. So we did a little bit of obviously creative freedom there, but yeah, this monkey was it's a flash in the past. That's awesome.
It sounds like a movie where, hey Bob, did you see this image? Click it. It's in your email. Across the cubicles.
Oh geez, yeah.
All right, so that's
The movie
task.
that no one in IR ever wants to watch.
Yeah.
Waiting for that to complete, but that should complete. So the next step was to create a few registry keys. So in particular, it's going to go from current user software classes and then create a directory structure called folder. And then underneath there, it's going to create different other things, shell and then shell open. So basically, very similar to what happens in the emulation plan is when a user, after you set these registry keys, you add the value of, it's in the emulation plan as a PowerShell command to execute that monkey PNG file, and then would do a UAC bypass to open up or execute the payload. And then that's how you'd get your interpreter callback in this case. So in this case, what we did was we changed it and we just I exported out or created just a basic interpreter binary, uploaded it to the same path, and then we tweaked it. Because again, Puppy allows you for interactive, Covenant doesn't. So we tweaked it so that we can include the value with it versus having it prompt, because it won't prompt, it'll just fail out and say, hey, no value is provided. Because the PowerShell command was very large and trying to figure out escapes wasn't super fun. But we'll just kind of drop those in there.
Those auto elevating like COM objects we spent it sits in my dreams. Like I get it, but like this is just such an interesting concept. Like this thing will just like, hey, I always run elevated, and like I will bring friends. Like I'm showing up to your wedding with like a plus whatever you tell me to do. Like this is like if I had to like devote resources to like a research project, I would love to try to do like ACLs in the registry, because like stuff like this shouldn't. I don't even think you're elevated yet. Like why can a user touch that key like that? Like it's not like it's not a Microsoft problem. I think it's like a Microsoft Plus implementation problem. I don't know where like the split, what is it, shared responsibility model? Like I don't know where that falls, but the fact that like that's just a thing that you can do seems like not cool.
Yep.
So this is kind of where we changed it. So what would happen in the plan, what it calls for is to set this key. And then when it was prompting you for a value, right? Like just if like you were going to do this in a straight PowerShell terminal, if you don't specify the value, it's going to prompt you and say, hey, what do you want this value to be? And then you either put something in or you don't, which in the next instance, when you set the delegate execute value, you don't put anything. But it was super long. Let's see if I can just copy it over.
For what it's worth, I think that's probably the safer. I don't know why I guess we just set a bunch of traps for operators to make mistakes. Good design.
This whole thing, and so trying to put it in quotes, it was like no, because you have single quotes or double quotes here, and I trying to figure out the escapes. I was like, you know what, we're gonna modify this slightly.
Also, so like shout out to whoever wrote like POS invoke image, like writing the for loop to like parse a bitmap for like, jeez, that's.
Oh, this was a terrible mistake. It's still going, and so everything else is just waiting. All right. So basically, what we would do next, we'll go trigger it. Where's the wrong box? All right. So I'm just gonna run it elevated because what it would do is it would we'd use SDCLT, which is a built-in binary for managing backups within the control panel. So once you set those registry key values, and then in our case, we would tell it to go execute the elevated binary in C downloads, right? If we went into Erlic's downloads, we could see elevated here. And if we just execute that, what we should get back in our Kali instance is we can see we get interpreter session, so we can keep going. But basically what happened is it would run in and generate and elevate and execute it as a high permission. So you get it as a high integrity level. And then from there, we would keep going. So we'll just kind of jump into it. I know we're at time, so we'll just kind of go through a couple more.
And I love that, like, at some point, we're just going to get another one, just like creep in. That actually happened in the day 2 plan. So we like, this is actually the plan that taught me what a like WMI event subscription was. So if you know, basically you can just set WMI triggers. If any system event happens, do run this, but it's kind of finicky. So like if you set it for like a user login, you get like 5. So like a couple times we were able to crash our servers because we'd get like 20 callbacks at the exact same time. What's happening now? The infamous sysinternal suite.zip, which sounds super legit. Like there's no payloads in there. That's all good stuff.
That's how I transfer stuff in my environments.
Internals suite.zip.
And it's funny too, because I think this is another, like, that's another really interesting thing about adversarial simulation is like you learn really good red team trade draft, where like exactly you said, like all this like obfuscation's really slick, these USC bypasses. Also, like 29 was notorious at the time for like they would drop like legitimate S-delete to disk and just like forensically clean up. Like it was like their OPSEC was phenomenal. So that was really neat. And I thought it was interesting to also like the timing of like, I think like not soon after this, like we did like obviously the events happened and then we did the emulation. And then like, I think it was right after, was it Sysmon picked up the file deletion like event? And it was like, it's actually interesting to see how like threats inform like, you know, offensive testing that informs like wide scale improvements.
Yeah, that's like one of the coolest things about like Atomic Red Team or even like these kind of emulation plans, and like it really can help people, like say like a tier 1 SOC analyst that wants to just understand more, and they have a lab and they're able to like play with things step by step and understand how these things work or operate. It's really cool.
There it is.
Are you going to try to type out that process name?
No. I tried so many times and I was like, let me just copy this and I'll paste it in. And no, it didn't work. So just use the ID, pro tip. But yeah, so in reality, what we did here, actually, I don't want to terminate this session. Oh, no. There we go.
There you are.
So what we did was there's a, in the resources part of the emulation repo, there's a package for sysinternals, which creates has things for ps-exec for lateral movement later. Oh no. There we go. Lateral movement, s-delete, and then a couple other things that are actually text files that we'd rename to PowerShell scripts that actually do things like the persistence mechanism, pulling files from a web-dav share.
I forgot about that. That's awesome.
Jump into.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I got run into this real quick, and then unfortunately, I do have a conflict that I need to jump to. But see if we can get some of this going.
Yeah, so I think you're on, the web dev is down on step 7, collection and exfil. That's where you're at?
Yes.
Or 8.
Yeah, so I'll first do the README. Basically we're just going to convert the README text. So if you go look at it in the repo.
And I think we ultimately knew that we would be 2 or 3 parting this.
Yes.
There's a lot. Yeah.
And then so now that should be good. And then there's functions. So if you go look at the text file in the repo right now, you look at it and you're like, oh, this is just the README TXT from sysinternals. No. Keep scrolling down. Within there's all the PowerShell functions that we're going to execute next real quick. And if my screen would stop blanking out, that would be phenomenal. So in this case, we'll do invoke discovery real quick, which basically does some reconnaissance. It goes and collects a bunch of information from user system. But now let's do kind of the same thing. So now we're going into step 5, which is persistence. So we're going to do the same idea. There is a second text file in there, which is the PS version. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to, got a key. You name that.
PowerShell syntax is so weird to me. The dot, like.
Yeah, and there's no tab complete in this session. Like when you do it like this, it's absolutely wild.
It's fun watching.
This.
There's like 2 flags, I remember correctly. There's like
1. No.
What was it? I just saw it. It's persist step 1 and 2. At least that's what it told me.
Oh, you're missing the T at the end of persist. Oh, yeah.
There it is. Copy paste.
Oh
man.
Oh, because it already exists.
Oh,
apparently,
nice.
Apparently, I forgot to clean up this testing, but that won't happen. It's a return service. But no.
Well, if we have to wrap up here, Paul, it's all good.
Yeah. But that's really it. So really, like I said, the only thing that I had to change was the puppy setup and use a different C2, which pick your flavor, and then just kind of tweak to its capabilities. But it was very straightforward from there. Just tweak, whether you're following and using the 192 addressing, you can literally just copy and paste it, put it in Caldera, or just step through it. It's very easy, which is super handy for doing this. But if you like to do it the hard way and the painful way, you can do exactly what I did and just good luck and have fun. But there's a lot of good information, and just go check these out because they are super handy and to kind of bridge the gap between the standard atomic testing and a full adversary emulation simulation red team operation. So this is super, super cool to see, and excited to see what more comes out of this.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. This was super fun. Always
a
topic I can probably, as you can tell, talk about forever. So appreciate your time and obviously your effort putting this together for the community. I know folks definitely appreciate any type of insights. So truly was an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for taking the time to join us, and hopefully we can catch you on the next one, and we'll actually have this rerun. We'll have data. We'll actually just go into the data and just pick it apart.
Sounds good. Let me know.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks all.
Awesome.
Catch you next time.
Thank you guys. Have a good day.
Cheers.
Have fun, everybody. Thank you all for joining.